There we go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, just let me touch a new file. Make sure I'm in the right, I think I'm in the wrong tab. There we go. Cool. So I'm just going to touch a new .hbs file, and this is going to go in our views folder, to-dos, and it'll be called new .hbs, if I can spell correctly. There we go. Okay, cool. And so now if you look at in Atom, I now have an index, new, and show views. Remember that we're only, when we talk about the conventions of 7 RESTful actions, 7 RESTful routes, we're only going to have 4 views. So we've created 3 of those views. You guys will do an edit view tomorrow, because an edit is associated with an update of an existing instance of something. Cool, so I have the view. Now, inside of this new .hbs, let me open it up. I'm just gonna go ahead and create like the shell of a form. So let me put in form tags here. The cool thing about Atom, and this is fine, but if you type in, you know, just the text FORM and hit tab, it's gonna go ahead and scaffold out some meat for that form. And that's okay. The lesson just has the basic form tags, but we're actually gonna add this stuff here in a moment. So it's okay if Atom puts that in there. Let me save this file. Cool. So if you just want to hit tab to autocomplete, that's fine. So forms need to know where to send information. We'll add a submit button in a few steps, but this form needs to know where to go, where to send this new to-do info. And it also needs the HTTP verb that it needs to use when we want to submit this form, submit a request. So which verb do we use to create a new resource? We use the post method, the post HTTP verb. What's the route that we need to post to? Well, if you look at the screenshots that we, the chart that we went through earlier, we're gonna send this to just /to-dos. So remember that our /to-dos route actually has a get request you can make and a post request. They're both gonna go hit that to-dos resource. So I'm just gonna update this form down here. So for the action is gonna be the path that we're sending this to. So I wanna send this to Express. I want it to hit the /to-dos route. And I'm also gonna send this in conjunction with a post method. Okay, so that's how Express is gonna know, oh, we're sending information to /posts versus requesting information to /posts, /to-dos with a get HTTP verb. So that's step 2. We definitely need those 2 attributes. I'm gonna get rid of that class. Those 2 attributes are required for a form to work. It needs to know where to go and what verb is gonna get you there. And yeah, actually that's kind of steps 2 and 3. So let's pause right there and walk through those 3 steps. So create a new view and just build the shell of that form. And then we'll move forward putting some input fields in there. And again, like most of the stuff we've gone through this week, this is kind of a rinse and repeat process for when you create new instances of a Node Express app, if you're going to follow this format. So this is very, very similar to what you guys are going to do for your projects and such. And a lot of this is just a pattern. Again, it's like muscle memory. The more you do it, the more you'll remember kind of the next step that comes next, you know, things like that. So just can't emphasize enough how much, you know, practice makes perfect with this stuff. I have a horrible memory. So anything you see me not look up, I only know it because I've done it so many times. Like I never set out, you know, to like memorize commands or whatever. I'm not very good at that. But the more I do it, you know, the more it just doesn't, I can't help but have it sink in. So if that's any consolation. Cool, we've got 4 thumbs ups. So let's get 2 more and then I will move forward. All right, we got 6, great. So let's move on to the next step. Let's flesh this thing out. I'm gonna share my screen again. So luckily, form fields aren't that different from something we've seen before in JavaScript, just an ordinary, a plain old JavaScript object. In an object, there are keys and values. Each input form is essentially going to be a key value pair. So let's see a semi-complete example and dissect it. I'm just going to type this out longhand, and I would encourage you guys to do so. Forms are kind of a pain to type out longhand because of all the syntax, all the characters, but we'll walk through this one. So let's add a label, let's add a description field essentially. So with HTML5 forms, you generally will have a label field and then the actual, you know, text field or what have you. But I'm going to make a label for, I'm going to call this description. Man, I'm having some typing issues today. Cool. And then I'll put a description field in here. Like so, and then below it, I'll put the input field that I want. So this field, I do want it to be a text field, so that's fine. The name is kind of important. We'll talk about that in a second. So I need to make sure that the name is essentially going to be the key that you send across the wire in that object. So you can think of the name field as the key for the data that you're sending. So the name is kind of important. So this needs to be description. So that's one input field. Let's put one more for that urgency or urgent. We're going to do a radio button for that. So this is going to be a label for urgent. And then let's add, let me put the urgent in here. And for lab time, you guys can fancy up the CSS on these things. We're doing this pretty bare bones. So let's make a span for yes and a span for no. So, you know, kind of a true false type situation. So that's going to be what's rendered to the screen. And then let me put an input. Man, I keep doing INS. Let's make an input field here. This is going to be radio. So make this a radio type. And then the name is going to be urgent because that's the name of the key that I want this value to be in the key that we're going to send back to Express if we were writing to a database. So this is going to be urgent. And then the value of this radio is going to be true. So I have one that's true, one that's false. I'm also going to put an extra attribute on here of checked. And that just means when the form is initially rendered that this radio button will be selected. Not a huge deal, but just in case a user tries to submit a form, let's say that you have some validation on your server side and you say, hey, Express, do not write a new to-do to my database unless it has an urgency value, either true or false. So let's say that a user kind of, you know, forgets and tries to submit a form that doesn't have a radio button checked, then that form may not validate. You may get some errors on the server side. So just for grins, I'm going to make a value checked. So if the user accidentally hits submit, by default, it's just going to have a true sense of urgency, just for what it's worth. Not a huge thing, but and then let's create an input field for the falsy here. So I'm going to make this is still going to be urgent, right? Because this radio button is only, even though there's 2 buttons to click, I only want to send one value for urgent, either yes or no, true or false. So the value for this one, we'll put false. And there we go. Yeah, so that's all for right now. We still haven't built a route, so we're still not going to see this form render. We'll do that in the next step. But if you take a look at that screenshot, the name attribute contains the key of this new to-do object, and we're going to print that out to the console. We're going to see that when we fully wire up this route. So what the user types into the text field or selects with the radio button is going to be the value. So we're going to have a description with the value, a key of description, a value, and then also a key of urgent and a value of either true or false. Give me 1 second and I'll address the Slack questions. So what I want to point out, I'll paste the screenshot back into Slack. Essentially, we mentioned that the form data is going to essentially be read as an object on the Express side. And this is kind of what it's going to look like. We'll be taking a look at this in a few steps. But it looks just like a plain old JavaScript object, right? It's going to have a request.body. So remember that the request has a lot of properties and methods we can call on it. We've already called request.params, request.query, things like that, request.route. So we're going to add a body property to it. And the property is going to be the keys and the values from this form. And that's somewhat what it's going to look like. We'll console log it on the server side just so we can actually see it in our server. But that's what we're building with the form. That's how Express is going to parse it. And so, like it says in the screenshot, so if we were dumping this stuff into our database or creating a new to-do, for example, we'd be able to call request.body.description for this new to-do. We could call request.body.urgent for this new to-do, because this is simply an object with keys and values that we can call. And then finally, the one thing that we're missing is an actual submit button, because how else are we going to tell the browser to send this junk to our server? So let me throw a button in here. So we'll do an input type. We'll make this a button. The value, so the value attribute on a button input field is just what's going to appear inside the button. You could make a button here if you wanted, but you would need opening and closing HTML tags. I just like input. So I'm going to put add a new to do as the value. We don't really need a name here, so I'll just clean that up for conciseness sake. And then if you look in the lesson README, I put some divs in there just to make this a little nicer. So I'm going to quickly slap some divs in here because this isn't formatted very well. So if you guys want to do the same, again, it'll just make it a little more readable when we actually spin this thing up in a minute. So just adding some divs, because otherwise all this garbage is going to be on like one line and it already looks pretty bad, but without any styling, but it's going to look even worse. Okay, cool. So that is creating our form. The next step, we will create the route and get this thing to render. But let's pause right there and go ahead and finish up those steps. So go ahead and flesh out your new to-do form. And then let me check. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, thanks for that, Audrey, Alan, and I think Matt. Yeah, I just took the default there. Yeah, both of these input types need to be radio. I just skipped that. Matthew says, do we need checked on the no button? You know, it's up to you. I just put it on the true for a sense of urgency, but it's kind of your choice. So if you want the default to be, you know, not urgent or urgent, I'm going to put urgent because I want it to actually get done. So I need that little kick in the pants sometimes. So I'm going to put it on urgent. I'm going to stop my screen share while you guys work. Then give me that thumbs up in Slack when you guys are done. Like I said, we don't have any validations right now on our data. We'll get to that next week. So you don't even have to put checked if you don't want to. It's no big deal. But I just did it.
I have a question for
Sure.
the request body. You're saying that that's going to be, are we adding that, or are you saying that's what is going to be taking, that's what is going to be taking from our data?
Yeah, that's some of the magic that we're going to add here in a few steps. But at the end of the day, that's how Express is going to be able to access that data. So remember that every time we make a request, there's a request object. And I'm pretty sure we console logged it, but the request object is pretty large. Like there's a lot of information, a lot of properties and methods on the request object. But specifically, now that we're submitting a form, we're going to be able to access that form data in request.body. That's where we're going to be able to find and parse that form data. Yeah. So if you're, so like I said, the request object is pretty dense. So if you're digging through the request object trying to find that form data, you want to look in the body property. That's where it lives. And we're actually going to add a little bit of a preview. We're actually going to have to add some middleware, because remember how Colin mentioned that the internet is just strings being sent back and forth? So Express actually doesn't really know how to parse an object out of the box. So we're actually going to add a new module and a piece of middleware that will turn that form data into something, into an actual object on the server side that the server can parse and save into the database and stuff. It's one of those steps that we don't have to do in Rails because Rails already gives us that magic, but we just have to add a particular module to make that happen with the mean stack. Alrighty, so we have 5 thumbs ups. Let's do this. I'm not going to put you guys in breakouts just yet. So just go ahead and work on this on your own. We'll stay in the room. But let me show you, I'm going to have you guys take a stab at creating your own new route. How many folks? We have all 7. So let me see how I want to do this. So I'm just, I'll stay on camera. We'll just all stay in here. So now that we have our view, see if you can create a route for that new. Don't worry about like submitting the form or anything yet. Just see if you can write a route that will render that view in the browser. So take a few minutes and just see what you can do with that. Remember, that's going to go in your todos.js, your to-do controller file. But just see if you can create a route that will render that empty form in the browser. And I'll give you a little bit of a hint. And it goes back to what we talked about on Tuesday about how the order of the routes matter. Make sure when you create this route that you create the new route above the show route. And maybe that'll click why you need to do that. But just make sure that you do that. The new goes above the show route. And we'll take a few minutes and see how you guys do with that one. Hey guys, just in, just in case there's any confusion. So for this route, all we simply want to do is make a .get request to render the form. So don't worry about sending any of the form data. None of that's going to work yet. We still have a few steps to go. All we're trying to do right now is go to todos/new, and we see that janky looking form show up. And also the example that's in the README that says request.body, and then it shows an example of that object. That's just for an example. That's what we're going to see on the server side eventually. You don't need to worry about putting that code anywhere. That code doesn't belong in the app. That was just to kind of like demonstrate what the server is going to see, what that form data is going to like turn into, that the server can read it. So just wanted to clear that up if there's any confusion. So I see 2 thumbs ups. Has anyone completed that but not given me a maverick? So take another minute or two, and then we'll walk through it together.
Played with it and it didn't seem to matter, but with like usually render, you call a view and pass it data. Since you're not really passing it data, do you just leave it empty or just drop that second argument?
Yeah, the second, that's a good observation. The second object is optional, the data object. Yeah, so with the new form, we aren't sending any data. It's an empty form. However, tomorrow when you guys do an edit, so remember an edit is essentially the same form, but we want to edit an existing to-do. So in that case, you will send the data object. We'll send the data for the form you want, the data for the to-do that you want included in the form so you can update it or manipulate it and such.
So do you normally just leave an empty object or just drop that second argument completely?
I think you can do either one. So it's less code, I generally leave it empty. But I think it'll render even if it's just an empty curly brackets.
Yeah, it works with both.
Yeah. I just err on the side of less code than more, so I just omit it. Okay, so let's walk through this so we can get to our next route. Let me share my screen and we'll walk through our new to-do. Okay, so the first thing, just let me build kind of the shell of this. So we're going to do a router.get. We know that, right? Because a get request requires a view, or rather, a view requires a get request. So I know I'm going to need that much. And I know that the path I want to hit is going to be to-dos/new. So that's the HTTP verb and my path or my route. And then let me pass in my callback function with request and response. And so for this one, just to get the form to render, it's actually just one more line of code. So I'm just going to do response. When I get a request at /new, I'm just going to send an empty form. So I'm going to render to-dos the new view. So I'll save that and I'll go over here in my to-dos app. And when I go to to-dos/new, I get that awesome looking form to render. Now, what I wanted to really point out to save you guys a lot of heartache is I mentioned that you want to make sure that the new route appears before the :id route. So let me move this route down. So now I have my new and show routes, but I just switched the order. So now when I go over here to to-dos/new and refresh, what am I getting now? Which route is it hitting?
The show route.
Yeah, so why is it hitting the show route?
Because you put it in the order that it will look for that first before looking for new.
Yeah, nice. So, I mean, ideally, we really want an integer or like, you know, the ID of that object sent in here, you know, like 6 or 2, whatever. But Express doesn't know. All it knows, it has :id, which could be anything. Remember, that's our wildcard. So it treats NEW the same as it would a number or any other thing that we passed in. So I just really wanted to, I hope that really sticks home because I've spent many a night struggling with why aren't my routes working? And it's simply because I got the order, you know, kind of switched up. So just kind of a word to the wise, whenever you're dealing with those wildcard URL params, just make sure that the order is correct because that sometimes that'll be frustrating for sure.
Would it be better to like have /ID and then /:ID to avoid that?
/ID. I see where you're going with that. Yeah, like /ID /
Because then you couldn't accidentally call it.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, theoretically, yeah, you could do that. It's not the RESTful convention though.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But that is a good point. Yeah, why not /to-dos /ID / you know, the integer that you want.
Right.
Yeah, it's just not the convention. And remember that when you guys, for example, do edit tomorrow, your edit is going to look like this. It's going to be like to-dos / the ID of the to-do you want to edit, and then you're going to add an edit path after that. And so that's another part of the convention, how you build these routes. But yeah, I see what you mean. Actually, I mean, this would work fine. You can build these routes however you want to. So that should work. However, the convention is just, you know, to keep these URLs as succinct as possible. So it's just a :ID. How do we create those CRUD actions with like the most concise URL code as possible is kind of the idea. That's a good point. All right, so that is our new. So remember that the new is the one of 2 steps required to finish our create action, to actually create a new instance of something. So let's polish this up. So our create, we're going to have a couple of steps for our create route. And so let me put in the first screenshot. So just for starters, you guys have probably already done this, but right now, if you go back to the new form and you click add a new to-do, we should get an error message. It should blow up on us. We should get a message saying it can't see it. Let me make sure I got my arguments in order here. It's not breaking the way we want it to. What is your deal? That's funky. Did anyone else, if you look at that screenshot, what we want to do is we want to see a little error message in the browser that says cannot post to to-dos. I don't want anything to break. I know. Actually, but it's kind of counterintuitive because eventually part of development is actually you want error messages. Like I want this error message because eventually you'll get in such a good practice that the error messages will tell you the next step. It's called error-driven development. So that's kind of where you want to go because these error messages aren't just for funsies. Like they're there to help prompt you. So right now I wanted to show you guys we should be getting an error and then that would tell us essentially the next thing to create. But why are we not getting that? Why won't you break when I want you to break? Let's see, did I misspell something in our action? I got my action. Is anyone getting that error message at all? You're just getting like no activity? Okay. So take like a 2-minute break. Just let me troubleshoot this real quick. I'll keep my screen share on, but if you want to like grab a drink or something, you don't have to sit there.
Hey Mark, is it the input type? Does it have to be like input type submit?
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I cannot post to-dos.
Yeah. Let me refresh. Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah, thanks for showing me that. So that is the one downside when I don't just copy the code. Sometimes I, pop in the wrong thing. But yeah, thanks for that catch. Yeah, we definitely want this input type to be submit. So that was our issue. So if you aren't getting, this is what we want. We want this very helpful error, cannot post to /to-dos. So it's pretty much building our next step. But if you aren't getting that, just double check that your form in new.hbs, just double check that input type is submit. Yeah, that's probably the one downside to all that Atom autocomplete helpfulness. Sometimes it'll autocomplete and if you're not paying attention, it'll do something that you may not intend. But in any event, we do want this kind of error, cannot post /to-dos. So this leads us to our next step, which is let's build a route, a .post route for our to-do. And again, this is a good error. So this is, again, error-driven development. This is kind of leading us down the road of the next step and such. So we've got the to-do create route there in Slack. So yeah, so what I want you guys to do, we'll take a few minutes, see if you can create the shell of a create route with a .post and just have it so it res.sends back a message that says like the post route is working. Don't worry about doing anything with the form data, parsing that data. Just when you hit submit on the form, I want you guys to render render to the screen with a res.send some sort of string that says, this route is working, hooray, something like that. So it's making sure that our code works in very small bite-sized chunks, very manageable chunks before we go and like try to grab that form data and save it to a database all in one fell swoop.
And for this one, it doesn't necessarily have to be above the get, does it? The get ID? Correct.
Yeah, so this is a unique ID. You're only going to have one post verb in the 7 RESTful routes. Yeah, so this one could, technically be anywhere you wanted. Generally speaking, I put this right below my my new route just because they're coupled, right? So we need the new, and then the create comes right after it. So if I have a pretty dense file, at least I know as I organize my code that if I'm looking through the file, I know that my new and create actions are right next to each other, so I can debug. But yeah, the .post shouldn't interfere with any other routes in this file. I'm going to stop my screen share while you guys work too. And I know I promised you guys a break just now, so if you guys want to, we'll take 5 minutes while you guys hack on this, and feel free to stretch your legs, whatever you need to do. Yeah, sometimes it feels that way, huh, Mike? All development is error driven. Yeah.
Mark, is it okay if I can see your screen share again? Because I'm getting an error and I think it's just a locational thing.
Yeah, let me, I'll reshare.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so here's my, well, this is my form. And I can put my routes up here if you want. So here's my routes, the form, and this is what we want to see when we hit submit, is this cannot post message.
The only thing you changed is submit?
Yeah, so down here in the form, the input type, when I auto-completed, it had text in there, and it needs to be submit, so that the HTML, the browser knows that this, again, when I click this button, I'm submitting this information somewhere. And so then, since it has that submit, it goes and looks at kind of the opening form tag to see where we want that info submitted to. Yeah, so that's all that I changed, was right there.
I had button there. I changed it to submit, and it still doesn't break.
Did you have a button or an input type? Did you create
input type and then button?
Sorry, I think that's what I put in there, was the word button. So change the word button to submit.
Yep, and it still doesn't break.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen. I'll stop my screen share. Audrey, are you cool?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna test mine out now, but I think I should be okay.
Okay, you can share your screen next if you want. We can get you through it. Yeah, Kieran, go ahead and share your screen. We'll take a look.
What? Didn't work. Hold on.
No problem. And one thing in that screenshot, it looks like it says create an app.post route. That was before before we refactored it. So that'll definitely be router.post, right? Because you're putting it in your todos.js file, and now everything in that file is attached to your router object. So just be aware of that. I'll update that in the README. Okay. That looks good.
So here's what I got, and
okay.
Where is it? All right, it says, so I changed it to submit, and I try to submit it.
And nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
So one quick thing, if you look on line 11, that second radio button needs to be type of radio. Okay.
So wait, do we want it to say something when we click?
Instead of saying text, it should say radio?
Right, because we need 2 radio buttons. So both of those inputs need to be radio.
I'm sorry, when I left, we were looking for it to break or not. So do we want it to break or not?
So previously we wanted it to break. It should say cannot post to /to-dos.
Okay.
Now what I'd like for you guys to do is create that router.post route. And now when you click submit on the form, I want you to send back a message, just a string. Don't worry about putting a lot of logic in the route. Just a string that says, whatever I put in that screenshot, that thing's tiny. Something like this route is working. The create route is working. Just do a res.send. Remember, that's something that we did on Tuesday morning. So you can do a res.send and pass in a string, or you can actually pass in an element or something. So we're just going to get that step working first to confirm that that route is functional. Once we know that that route is functional because we get a message sent back, then we'll worry about fleshing it out with some more complex logic. But we're just trying to do it one step at a time, kind of the most, as simple as we can go, one step at a time here. I can paste kind of the message that I requested you guys put. You can put whatever you want in that response message, just success or, yeah. So in the README, I suggested, create a new to-do is working. So something like some message like that. Kieran, did you get your stuff working?
Yes, that's what it was. I put radio there, and then I clicked refresh, and then I clicked submit, and then it broke. So
okay, cool. So take a stab at creating a router dot. Here, I'll even I'll give you guys kind of the shell of what this should look like. So there's like kind of the rough draft of just getting that post route kind of instantiated. So if you want to flesh that out, yeah.
I'm just gonna help Audrey debug something, so I asked her to share a screen. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, yeah, no sweat.
All right, so Cody, if you see, hold on, I'm gonna make sure you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, so if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I see the error. So the error says failed to look up view/show in views directory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you scroll down to where we render the show? Yeah, and I think there's 2 errors. What is your show file called?
Show HBS.
Yeah, but there's an S at the end, right? So we want to be careful about punctuation. And also, I think prior, how do we render out the index? And what was the syntax for the index if you can go to that route or to that res.render?
That one I literally went over my head. I followed it, but I had originally something else here at name, but then I saw Mark's as at ID, so I thought mine's supposed to say ID.
Yeah, that part's fine, but I just want to go to the other route. I think it should be called index to do route.
My index to do route?
Yeah, like you see how we have like router.get for the ID, but remember how we were rendering index.hbs before? No. I just want to see that route.
No, I'm a little lost. Sorry, hold on. You mean up here?
Yeah. Right. So you see on line 12 how we have res.render to do/index.
Mm-hmm.
Render index.hbs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the syntax should be something similar to that. I think we can get rid of that backslash and see if that makes a difference. The backslash for the show route. Yeah, let's see if that works. Because when we debug, we want to just change one thing at a time. Yeah. I think that's what you want, right?
I think. I'm still trying to catch up. So I wasn't even sure how to. I wasn't in my browser because it was just one too many things. So I just only got that because my server wasn't giving me my usual errors.
Mm-hmm.
So this is for if I'm going to new, and that's showing me my new to do. If am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
And then if I want
showing your new, you're rendering your new .hbs.
But when we were trying to get that error, this would
message.
Shouldn't error message here? Thank you.
It doesn't seem like there's an error right now.
No.
Right?
So shouldn't there be an error?
Why would there be an error? That's the question I want to ask.
Wasn't this because before we had this button submit conversation, you were saying we're trying to show the error to. Well, this is what I thought we were talking about, was that we're trying to get the error to show because we need to post a button or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah. So it seems like we may be rendering the wrong HBS file, right? Because ideally, when we hit the new route, right, we want the button to appear with the radio buttons and the submit button. But it's not rendering that right now, right?
No.
So
it's doing my show. It's doing this one instead.
yeah, so let's debug that and see why it's showing that one. We can go back to server.js. Yeah, so let's work from like the top down. So you can scroll down a bit and see why we are rendering the show. So for our first, can you stop and go up a bit? So on line 21, we have app.get and /, right? So then that just sends our home page. So that route should be fine. So now we can go down. Yeah. And let's stop at each router that we get.
Okay. So this is all commented out because we're not using this anymore.
Right.
Now, in my index, well, I moved that to the data. No, wait. Oh, God.
Yeah, we just go back to server.js real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just stay here. Can you go down a bit? Yeah. So for every to-dos route we're going, now we're doing to-dos controller, right?
Yeah.
So now we can look in our, to-dos controller. And let's start from the top down again.
Okay.
Yeah. So for the first route that we have for just to-dos, we'll just render that. And I believe that works fine, right?
This one?
Yeah.
I have not
let's
yet
test it.
checked it. So I do believe it was working.
But that's now to to-dos, right? / to-dos, because now we're doing all the routing from the to-dos route to go to the to-dos controller.
Correct.
Yeah, so you can do a localhost 3000 / to-dos, and then it will tell the router on line 10 to use that logic. Right, so then that is our to-do / index, right?
Yes.
Right, so let's go down to the next one. And for router.get, add to-dos new, but do you see what's wrong with line number 19?
Well, there's to-dos here.
My mom, can I have one?
No.
Yeah.
Too, Mommy. Okay.
So now since we changed something, let's test that out.
That's no. Yeah.
So now our error is failed to look up to-do / to-dos new in view directory. So now where do you think our error, where do you think we should debug for our error? Since it's not finding the / to-dos / new. So remember, when we do res.render, I believe we want the syntax, the beginning of our file. We don't need the backslash, right? So on line 20, let's try to remove the backslash and see what it does. We can leave to-dos there, but just the first backslash. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Do you save the file?
Yeah.
All right, let's try to refresh that again.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just like small syntax stuff, but for our res.render, we don't want to start with a backslash. That's just because that's how it goes into our views. But it's confusing because with our router, like on line number 19, we usually start with a backslash to signify that we go to those routes, you know? So that's just something to keep in mind. So I know it's like, we're used to putting backslashes for everything, but it's like rendering, just remember rendering views. We don't really want the backslash. And if you want to, you can also put your show.ehs handlebars, HBS, .hbs into your to-dos file also. So it could be like views, to-do, show.hbs.
Would that mean that I would have to change my render to look directly in to-dos?
Exactly, yep.
But I don't need a backslash for to-dos, to-dos backslash shows, so I know it's to look in the to-dos folder of the views.
Yep. So you also want to test it too. Yeah. And if it works, then everything's good. Mark, you're on mute.
That's crazy. I forgot I muted myself. Yeah, so just to add to that, so remember that the convention, when you build an app, you're most likely going to have like several different show.hbs views for the multiple resources that are in your app. So number one, the show route is showing one of something. So that file needs to be SHOW, not S. We're not showing multiple instances. We're only showing one. So that needs to be a singular show.hbs. I think you'd called it shows. So that is the convention. That needs to be singular. And then to echo Cody's point, I would just drag that show file into your to-dos view folder. That's where it should live.
Now it's broken again.
Okay. You want to share your screen?
Go back on
share?
screen.
Can I share it really quick before?
Sure. Yeah, go for it. Be my guest.
This is a life of a programmer.
Okay, so I'm not getting the part where, so I have it here, I'm putting something in, but I know you said to put post. I'm confused how I can tell it to show one. So I have my show here. How do I refer to the show folder in the post? Do I put this inside of here or do I leave it outside?
It's going to be an individual route.
Okay, so here, and I put it show like that. I don't think so. So
No, that route looks good.
Yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't work for me.
You should look to where your form is being submitted to. That would be the first place to check.
Okay. Forget the style things. I just added a style folder with
That's
nothing
Cool.
in it. It's
Yeah, that's great. That'll be part of like your lab time. That's
I
cool.
haven't connected, but like, so I guess I'll just refresh. And where would I see that?
You can inspect your elements, or you can also just look at the form you created in new.hbs.
Okay. Oh, is it?
Now, look on so Alejandra, we fixed this a minute ago. So you see where it says input type of button on like line 9 or so? I can't really see. We need to make that input type of submit. Yeah.
Right here?
Line 8, yeah.
Yeah.
Submit, is that how you spell it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. So Audrey, do you want to share your screen? We'll get you straightened out.
I sorted it out.
Oh, you did? Good.
Yeah. I kept working at it. I was when I was trying to show it in my browser, I wasn't going to the right place.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem. This stuff gets easier too. I mean, I would echo Cody's point that a lot of time as a professional developer, you're debugging, you're trying to figure out stuff, but it definitely gets easier, you know?
I think for me, it's just that like, because I'm still not normal to it, when I'm supposed to use this backtick versus a quote versus not using a backtick when using it, the rationale is still not in my mind in a way that makes sense. So I'm just habitually doing the same thing and then running into the same errors because I don't know when the nuances changes yet.
The only time we'll use a backtick is if we're doing string interpolation. Like so. So that would be a backtick, right? If we're trying to substitute a JavaScript variable, like substitute the value for that variable in something. That's pretty much the only time we're going to use a backtick in this class. For just FYI. So when in doubt, you may just do a single tick. That's probably most of the time what we'll be doing, unless it's a specific string template situation, which is part of the new ES6 syntax, a really great feature. But I would just say, like, as a word of encouragement, my experience as a developer, you don't wake up knowing it all. You don't wake up feeling like LeBron James. I wake up anticipating the stuff's going to break, but I'm not afraid of it, and I'm not intimidated by it. I know I'll get through it, and I'll figure it out. And I think that kind of confidence, in my humble opinion, is really the makings of a good developer. Because, again, my counterpart that I worked with for 2 years and mentored under, had a PhD in computer science from Georgia Tech, and his stuff blew up all the time. Like, that's just the nature of this, being a developer. So for me, it's not that you wake up and you know it all. It's that you wake up and you're like, you have, quiet confidence in yourself. You're like, yeah, this is cool. I'm going to get through it. But stuff will never not break, in my opinion. Okay, life lessons. We're doing life lessons. Okay, so we're almost through our create action, guys. We need like 2 more steps, and then we'll put you guys into lab time to flesh out this app. And keep in mind that this, the lesson today and tomorrow, I mean, actually, theoretically, all the lessons serve as good guides and templates for your projects. So keep in mind that you guys are going to be building this type of app several times over the next few weeks. And so, this is the first time you guys are doing this, and you're doing a great job. This is definitely, if this was easy, everyone would do it. It's not easy, and it takes a while to get comfortable with it. So you're all, right where you should be. So let's move forward. We need to do a little bit of trickeration to get that form data from the form and parse it into some digestible, into a digestible object that Express can do something with. So let's move to our next step, which is going to be installing a really great NPM package that's going to help us out with that. So here's kind of a summary of what we're doing. So to receive parameters, to receive those keys and values from a form, what happens when we hit submit? Well, the request is made to the server, and we can see that the correct route is getting hit, right? The reason that we know the correct route is getting hit is because you guys are sending back a message that looks like the create route is working, or it works, hooray. So it's, again, taking this in baby steps. So at least we know that the route is rendering successfully, which is like a huge win. That's a great first step. And up until now, how have we passed data and information from the client to the server? Well, forms send data inside of what we call the body of a request. So we're going to get into the request.body property. And remember that the other properties we've looked at are like res.params, request.params. We've also looked at route, request.query. And so now we're going to look at how to get that form data from request.body. That's our next step. So by default, Express doesn't have the ability to read the body sent by that form in that post request. I don't know why, it just doesn't. Some frameworks do have that functionality built in, but Express doesn't. Remember, Express is very unopinionated. It's kind of like a la carte, like just do what you want with this framework. So we're going to need to add this module. So we're going to need to npm install another package. That package is called body parser. And again, this is one of those, anytime you're dealing with a form in an Express app, more than likely you're going to need this module to help sort things out. So body parser is a library that parses the body of an incoming post request and stores the data as a key value pair on our request argument. So again, alluding back to what Colin talked about, essentially under the hood of the internet, all the data is being sent back as just one long crazy string. So we need to turn that string from the form into an object that Express can play around with. And that's essentially what this module does. It's going to create that body property on the request object. So you guys can do this along with me. The first thing we're going to do is that npm install, I'll put this into Slack, -- save body - parser. So again, pretty par for the course here. We're going to call npm install -- save is going to go ahead and save body parser as a dependency in our package.json, which saves us the headache of having to type it in ourselves. And then body parser is the argument that specifies what npm module we are trying to install. So go ahead and run that. Make sure that you're in your project folder. And you probably want to be in the root of your project folder. So if you've CD'd into like views or whatever, just make sure that you're in the main project folder so it can find your package.json file. So we'll save that bad boy. And give me a thumbs up if you're able to successfully install that. Again, just to do a sanity check, you can go into the node modules folder and make sure that you have a body parser folder, or you could go into your package.json and look in your dependencies property, the dependencies object, and just make sure that it says body - parser. Cool. Okay, so let me share my screen for this next step. So let's walk through step 2. We're going to add a little bit of code to our server.js. And this should be somewhat familiar. So hopefully you're seeing a pattern with these apps. Anytime we add a new module, we're going to need to require it. So let's do that here. I'm going to put body parser. It shouldn't really interfere with any of these other variables. I'll just put it under this to-dos controller. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to put it right below HBS. And kind of the only reason I'm doing this is I'm just going to keep all of my third-party requires together in one spot. That to-dos controller, that's a file that we created separately that belongs to us. So I'm just going to try to keep these somewhat organized. At least it makes sense to me. You'll probably come up with your own comfort level and stuff. But let's create a variable called body parser, and then let's require the module. And again, the more you do this, this is just, kind of a pattern. Most of the time, this will be like the first step after you npm install something new, most of the time. So body parser is a middleware, which means it's going to take, remember that middleware is anything that happens in between our request and response objects. So body parser is a pretty great instance of middleware in that it's going to take the request, it's going to parse that form data, and then do whatever we need to with it in between that request and response. So this is going to use app.use. So remember, anytime you see app.use, use is an express method, particularly for middleware. So let's put an app.use in here. I'm just going to stick it below the logger line and the to-dos controller line. Again, just trying to keep all those .uses together so I know where to find them. So let's do app.use, and we're going to use the body parser URL encoded method. And then that's going to take some arguments. We're just going to pass in one. I think I have too many. I think I can get rid of one of those. Cool. So body parser, if you go through their documentation, there's a lot of cool stuff that it can do. But specifically, we're going to use the URL encoded method. And then inside here, I'm going to put extended true. So this just, it says there in the README. It's just from the documentation. So when the params are passed from the browser back to Express with a request, it will be decoded automatically, allowing us to use dot notation when working with JavaScript objects. The extended true makes the objects more JSON-like. So remember that when calling objects, we can use dot notation or we can use those brackets. So it has to do with that. Just adding this extra extended true just makes these objects a little bit more user-friendly. So we're just going to include that. It's kind of one of the best practices from their documentation. So that's step 2. So we npm installed, we required that module. We're using that .use, the middleware, to actually tell Express that we want to use it. And then the last thing to make sure this is working, let's go and play around with our route in our to-dos controller file.
Sorry, the
Sure.
NodeMon is like freaking out because of the semicolon there. So I want to get rid of that on the extended true.
Oh, did I leave one inside it? Oh, okay, yeah. So since it's an object, remember objects need a comma at the end of them if we're going to change stuff together. Yeah, so thanks for that heads up. So let's go to your todos.js, and we got this res.send working, right? Just kind of like a first stab, just to make sure that this route was working at all. So now that we do know it's working, let's see if we can just send the request.body. So it's a little bit of an inception here. Let's see if we can actually send back what the form data just sent over the wire, or what the form just sent over the wire. So just to test this out, let's do a res.send request.body. So ideally, let's check this out. Let me stop my screen share and let me share my entire screen here. Cool. So we added that code. Let me go back to new. Let's load a new form. Description, what's a good to do? I don't know. Eat dinner, pretty urgent. So now when we click add new to do, we get a blank. So let's check our server logs. And let me do a console log. Let's see what we're getting back over the wire. So right now we're getting undefined in the server. So I think we need to configure, let's see, we installed body parser. Let's see. So we're getting undefined. So it is getting the form data, but the form data is undefined because Express can't parse it correctly. So just let me double check my spellings and such. So we got body parser, it's working great. We're using it correctly. Looks good. Just let me try something. Let me try to move it to the top. It shouldn't matter, but oh, well, I guess it did. So let's make sure that we put app.use. Again, the order does matter. And so it does need to parse the data before it hits the routes. Express is so unopinionated. So let me do a screenshot of what those few lines look like. So just make sure that you put your app.use in that, that order-esque. And what we should see is body parser's magic. So we should see that to-do object here, not only in the server, right, because I added a console log just to debug, but also here in the browser. So this is the object, and now Express can do something with that. It can write it to a database. It can do all sorts of cool stuff. But that's what body parser does. It just turns that crazy string that the form sends into a digestible, plain old JavaScript object. So give me a thumbs up in Slack.
What was the order again?
Yeah, take a look in Slack there. I'll put a screenshot for you. And so give me a thumbs up in Slack if you can get that janky looking object to render in your browser. And I'll keep my screen share up just in case this is helpful. So this is my order. Just make that body parser middleware is at the top there. And that should be fine.
Can I see your to-do JavaScript?
Yeah, let me move that down here. So there you go. So there's the post route, and I'll put this into Slack as well. So we're just sending that data back just to confirm what it looks like and make sure that the body parser is working correctly. But if you look in Slack, that's what we did. So if you want to move forward, I'll help folks if you're still getting that working. But our next step is I want you guys to take a few minutes. Let me sum up what we've done so far with body parser. Then I'll give you a little bit of a challenge. So we installed body parser, and what that did for us is it added that body property to our request object. And that body property contains the keys and values from our form. It also parses the body of that incoming request. So remember that the incoming request is going to be just a crazy long string. And Express doesn't know what to do with that. So body parser can parse that string, create a body property on request, and turn that string into a proper object that we can play with and do stuff with. And then finally, that last bullet, it added the data from our form as the value of request.body. So that's how we access form data, is eventually, after all those steps, we can call request.body and grab that information. And our next step is to add that to-do from a form to that seeded to-dos array. And so that's my next challenge for you guys. I'll go ahead and paste this into Slack, and then I'm happy to help anyone if you're having any issues. But I'll go ahead and paste this in case you want to move forward. Cool. So for you do, number one, complete the post route so that it saves the value of request.body to our array. So we sent the request.body, we're console logging it in the server. We're also sending it to the browser. So we know that it's working. We know that it's parsing correctly. So now see if you can write some code that will add that new to-do object to that seeded to-dos array. So see if you can write some code that will do that. And then remember that the post route, if you look back at the chart from earlier, remember that the post route doesn't have a view associated with it, right? Only GET requests have a view. So in our post route, once we add that to do to the array or do something with it, we need to tell that route, we need to tell Express where to send the user after it does whatever actions that we want. So we're going to need to use a res.redirect or response.redirect. And that's where you tell the response where you want to send it. Now think about the apps that you use on a daily basis when you create a new instance of something. Some applications may send you, if I just created a new user, some applications may send you to see the specific information for that user, or it may send you to that user's show page with the new information. Some applications, when you add a new user, maybe it redirects you to the index page for that user. So you can see all of the users with that new person included. That's really your preference. Different apps do different things. Maybe after they add a new to-do, you want to send them to, Amazon. I don't know. You can send them wherever you want. But the point being, the post route requires a redirect. And so that's what that number 2 is there. So instead of a res.render, we're going to send it to a route with a redirect. Cool. So feel free to move forward and work on that. And I'm going to stop my screen share, and I'm happy to, if anyone's having anything blow up, we can take a look. And if you did get the previous step working, and when you get this step working, if you wouldn't mind, just give me a thumbs up so I can keep track.
I'm gonna share. Well, I had already shared this screen, but
okay.
So I'm putting whatever in, and I'm still not getting. So where am I? Here, I put it in the order that you said right here.
Okay.
What other
okay.
do I have that's not working?
Okay. Did you do an npm install of body parser?
I did.
Okay. How can we check that?
We can go here.
How can we check that even further?
Body parser, maybe?
No, just go into your package.json.
Oh, yeah, I remember now.
Yeah. Again, I'm sure it's all fine.
It's there.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So let's check out your server logs. So what happened in your NodeMon server when you submitted that form? Let's see if any
right here.
helpful information.
This is when we first were getting undefined, which we fixed, and then I didn't get anything really that I could use, or at least I could use.
Well, you got a 200, so that's good. It looks
maybe in my
Okay, hold on one sec. If you don't mind, go back to the server logs, please. Let me finish reading that.
Oh, sorry.
Because it looks like your new route is getting a 304. So I just wanted to make sure I was seeing that right. But your post is working. Okay. So yeah, let's check out your server. Sorry, excuse me. Your to-do.js, your controllers.
Oh, I didn't add anything here. Did I?
That looks, oh, yeah, line 16, it's the request object, right? So it's yeah. It's a little tricky. One letter for sure. Okay. Yeah.
Wait, no, let me get. So let me go to this over again. Okay, perfect.
There you go. Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Is anyone else need some assistance? Let's see how many thumbs ups we have. I see 4. I don't know if that includes Alejandra.
No.
Okay.
Just fixed mine now. Didn't like the
Oh, good.
the semicolon after true was a no-go.
Yeah, I get into that habit because, more often than not, I'm going to put a semicolon to end a statement in JavaScript. But yeah, that URL encoded true is actually an object. So you can't put a semicolon in object syntax. Oopsie. How are we doing? So I see 5 thumbs ups. Okay, see 5 thumbs ups. That's awesome. Let's get one more thumbs up, and then oh, 6, great, cool. So we're almost at lab time. We're making really good time. Would one of you folks mind sharing your screen and walking us through your process for completing the route? Some of you guys may have done it like slightly differently, so I'm curious to see your thought process. So who wants to show how they got the post working and pushing a new to-do from a form onto the array? Alan, how's the elbow, by the way?
Slowly healing.
Slowly healing.
Yeah.
Was that your elbow hand that you just raised?
Yes.
That's good.
Doesn't hurt.
That's a good sign. Cool. Yeah, if you don't mind sharing your screen and let's see what you came up with.
All right. So have this right here. So when you go to make this bigger, use /new, type in something, it adds it to the end. So
Nice.
basically, I'm just pushing the body object to the array.
So what's going to happen if you stop your server and restart it?
It should reset it to what's in here, right?
So we talked about like a seed file earlier or some hard-coded pieces of data. Again, maybe if you want to use all 50 states and their abbreviations, that may be something good to hard code. But yeah, to the greater point, right now, since we're not using a database to persist this information, if you stop your server and clear it out and restart it, to Alan's point, he would only, the ones that he just created with the form would not persist. And that's really the beauty of a database, which we'll get to next week. Only those hard-coded ones would reload. Very nice. Did anyone do that slightly different?
Pretty much the same for me too. I added an anchor tag to the bottom of the index.hbs to link back to the new.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's going to be for lab time. I'm going to have you guys create some other stuff. I'm going to paste this in Slack. So this is also in the README. I just want to show you my inner workings. It accomplishes the same thing, but it separates it out into like one intermediary step. I just want to show you this because we're going to encounter this next week when we add a database. Occasionally, we're going to want to break out our stuff a little more explicitly. So just want to point this out so you see the pattern. But this is essentially what Alan did, except I went ahead and created a new like to-do object inside that route with a description and urgent field. And then I created that object. Then I tried to push that object onto the array. It's tomato, but I just wanted you to see that pattern because we're going to be doing that next week with databases when we start dealing with larger data sets. There may be an occasion where instead of passing that data through directly, maybe we need to create an object first or something. So maybe for some validations or what have you. But the way Alan did is totally legit for sure. But just so you see that pattern. Cool. Well, great work today, you guys. We covered a lot of stuff, and you should give yourselves a pat on the back because this is like the first full stack application you guys have built. Again, we're going to add authentication. We're going to add a database. So we still have a ways to go, but this should be exciting. I mean, you guys are sending form data from the front end to the back end, rendering it to the browser, pushing it onto array. You know, this is pretty complex stuff. It's pretty cool. So we're getting there. So let's get to lab time. Cody, we may have some breakout rooms already built, but if you wouldn't mind building a few just in case with the buddies. And let me walk you guys through your lab time challenges. The first one, we're actually ahead of the ball because I had you guys do the show route. That was the first thing we did. So you guys are ahead of the curve there. But for lab time, I want you guys to keep building on to this app. Number one, build a show route. We already did that, so you can just skip to number two. So number two would be a challenge. See if you can add a nav bar to your app. It sounds like Mike already took a stab at that. Actually, some of you may have already taken a stab. But remember that layout file in your views folder, remember that that's kind of the picture frame for all of the views. So you probably want to add a nav bar to that. So see if you can add a nav bar that would link to the index. It would link to the new. So maybe if you have a new to-do link, it'll render the form and such. So that's number two. Number three, you probably noticed in that screenshot, I threw in some Comic Sans. That was my styling, pretty fancy. That took me all night to hack together. So if you want to add some styling, that's another challenge. But number three, make each to-do on the index page clickable. So this is a pretty common feature in applications. And as a hint, you can use anchor tags so that each individual to-do, when clicked, will link to its correct show page, like the image above. So if you take a look at that image, take a look at the second one where it says you have two to-dos. Notice that the description value, it's clickable. It's a link. So when you click on one of those links, it will take you to the show page for that specific to-do. And so that's a pretty common, feature in apps, right? If I have a bunch of friends listed on my Facebook profile page, when I click on a friend, it'll take me to that specific friend's information. So play around with handlebars and with that and see if you can incorporate that. Number 4, if there are no to-dos, so if you've, actually for this exercise, we're not going over delete. So yeah, you can skip number 4 if you like. That's probably more of a tomorrow, but the idea is that right now you put some handlebars logic that says, I have 3 to-dos, I have 4 to-dos. Well, what happens if you finish all your to-dos and you don't have any to-dos left? So number 4 is just an exercise. So if you have no to-dos, see if you can display a message, maybe in a P tag that says you have no to-dos. And to test that out, since we're not going over delete today, you may want to comment out in your data file, you may want to comment out that seeded to-dos array just to pretend like you don't have any data. So if you want to test out number 4, that would be an approach for that. Number 5, see if you can add an external style sheet. I see that some of you have already added one. I think Alejandra had already taken a stab at that. See if you can add a style sheet in a JavaScript file if you want. See if you can add a location field to the seeded to-dos and to the form. So right now you have description and urgent. See if you can add some other property to your to-dos, location, price, due date, something like that. So you need to update your data and you need to update the form. So that's a really good practice. We do that a lot. Create separate sections on your index page for urgent and non-urgent to-dos. So you may want to do some handlebars logic. So you're only showing the urgent ones at the top, non-urgent at the bottom, or what have you. Create a view for your home or root route. So we still have a home route, right? If you just go to localhost 3000, I forget what that shows actually. We don't have a view for it. Oh, it just says this is our home page, right? It just sends a string. But if you want to play around, create a view for your root route or your home page, just for grins. And then finally, number 9, and this is a really good challenge. If you get through the other ones, this is a really good one. Or if you want to start with this one, I think this is a really good practice for what you went through today. But build an index, show, new, and create routes, which are the routes that we covered today. See if you can create those routes for a movie resource or for a songs resource or recipes, just anything you want. But walk through the lesson again with a different resource other than to-dos. And that'll be a good, again, that repetition is really key. So those are some challenges for lab time. We'll put you guys into your buddy breakouts. Any questions about that? And if you do add CSS, maybe it's a challenge, don't have Comic Sans. Oh, you're already open the rooms. Okay, that's cool. It's fine. I'm just rambling. It's cool. I'll see you guys around 5:30.
They looked excited, that's why.
I hope so.